You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt Migaki, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped a killer episode with Kelly Schaefer of Atheist. There is this episode and over 440 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers.
What's up, good people? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm very excited to share this one with you. This is like 4 years in the making. We finally made it happen. I'm talking to Matt from Wren Cuff. If you've been in the pedal game for a while, you have probably seen Wren Cuff pedals, and you know this guy is a master of the Big Muff circuit. And we dive into that and some of the, eccentric things about the Big Muff and why certain ones do certain things and why he has spent so much time on this particular circuit. I think you're really going to enjoy this. This one gets pretty nerdy, and we go off into all kinds of different directions. So I'm very excited to share this one with you. But before I do that, I got to let you know about something that is happening right now. From today, September 25th, until October 2nd at midnight Pacific time, you are going to have the chance to win one of two Maris LVX pedals. That's right. I'm getting together with Maris. They've been supporting the podcast for a little while now, and they are supplying two LVX pedals. That's right, two. There are going to be two lucky winners of these pedals, and there are two ways that you can enter. If you're not familiar with the LVX, go hit the Google machine and familiarize yourself. That's not what this is about. This is about letting you know how you can win one of two LVX pedals. It's really simple. First of all, you could become a patron of the show. Everyone who is a patron of the show, starting right now until October 2nd, is automatically entered to win one of the two pedals. So that's all you got to do. Go support at any tier from now until October 2nd. This is over October 2nd at midnight. So if you go over to Patreon, patreon.com/tonemob, support at any level, and you will not only get extra bonus content, but you will be automatically entered to win one of these two LVX pedals. Now, of course, we wanted to have a no purchase necessary option as well, and you can do that by going to tonemob.com/LVX and following the instructions there. That's tonemob.com/LVX, tonemob.com/LVX. Go over there, follow the instructions. It will require you actually listening to a podcast episode. So go over there, tonemob.com/LVX, and check it out, and you can find out the free way that you can enter this contest. All right, without further ado, let's get into this episode with my dude Matt from Wren Cuff. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar stuff occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland. With me today, I have Matt from the mighty Wren Cuff. What's going on, dude?
Not much. Just excited that we've been able to finally make this happen. I think we've been talking about it for, 4 years or something at this point?
Yeah, I feel like I saw you right away, on a motorcycle at NAMM, and we started talking about it then, and since then it's just been like, yeah, we'll get to it. We'll do it. And now we're finally locked in and doing the thing. My first exposure to your stuff is it's a weird time in guitar pedal history. It was when Pro Guitar Shop still had a brick and mortar store, something that I've brought up a lot of times on this podcast, and a lot of people don't even realize was a thing, but they actually had a really nice brick and mortar for a very short time here in town. And me and my buddies, this was prime Portlandia time. And so we saw your pedals, and we just started laughing internally to ourselves. We're like, put a bird on it. Like, it's the Portlandia thing. But yeah, you really carved out a niche within the niche that is effects, where you're just the Big Muff guy. How did this all happen? Like, what made you start the company, and how did that become the thing that you have explored probably more thoroughly than just about anyone?
Yeah, I mean, it was the typical thing, it was kind of by accident. When we started off, I was in a condo and I had a new baby, and I had this little like back because I didn't want the solder fumes with the baby and, all that kind of stuff. So it was on our outdoor patio, and I had like a little development deal with this band I was in at the time, and the guy that was producing it had all these boutique pedals. Like he would just buy tons of stuff because it was a tax write-off for him. And this is the first time I'd been exposed to like Way Huge and a Z-Vex and Keeley and all that kind of stuff. And I really dug the pedals. I really wanted them, but I couldn't afford them at the time. I was totally broke.
Sure.
So I go online and I kind of, stumbled across the DIY community that at the time I was like, oh man, this is like, there's so many people on here and so many brands, but little did I know what was coming. Like I kind of thought, I was like, did I miss this whole first boutique wave, coming? And, that's nothing compared to what it is now as far as the number of brands.
What year was this,
pedals.
roughly?
I say 2008, but it's more like 2006, 2008. We kind of like officially did all the stuff, but that was the end of I think there's a handful of the early Wren Cuff pedals that are dated at the end of 2006 that pop up sometimes, like these little like hand done things, but it wasn't, I was still like waiting tables and, struggling musician and stuff like that. So could hardly call it a company, but, what kind of did the big muff thing was I wanted to, Way Huge was totally defunct at that point. It was just gone. Right. And so I wanted to make a pedal. And honestly, I was like, I wasn't even that into the swollen pickle. It wasn't like, oh, it's great. I was just kind of like poking around. And I was like, I don't see anybody doing Way Huge, like, I always hate to say clones, but clones and stuff like that. And I knew it. I knew his Red Llama had, I don't know if you know who Craig Anderton is, but he's like old school. He had this book of all these pedals or effect circuits and all that, and they were all really like dated. But I knew the Way Huge Red Llama was pulled out of one of those books. Like George does, he'll even tell you, it came from that book. And I was like, somebody gave me that book, and I started piecing it all in. I was like, I'm going to do these. I even sent him an email back in the day. And I was like, hey, is this cool if I do this? I know you're not really around anymore, so I assumed it wouldn't matter. And he got back to me like, I don't know, like weeks later, and was just like, yep, just don't mess with the copyrights or anything, the name part of it and all that.
Yep. Branding and all that.
Yeah. Now I've become buddies with him, so it's pretty neat. But, at the time I was just, I don't know. I just felt people don't really do that much anymore, but I was like, I don't, And so I just kind of dug really into the swollen pickle because it uses this, it looks like an IC chip. I don't know. I don't want to get too technical for this, but it's kind of a fake IC.
Get as technical as you want. It's fine.
But, inside people always think, oh, he's got this IC in there, it had this IC in there. And basically the IC is just 4 transistors on the IC. But the thing about them is they're matched kind of perfectly.
Got it.
Within the IC. But George always did the thing where he'd sand off the IDs on the chip. So I had to kind of fish around. And I came up with one. I don't know if it was the same exact one, but it sounded like, auditioned a bunch of them, and it sounded right to me. And so I did the same thing, sanded it off. I'm like, I don't know, it's going to know which one I use. And I started selling those, and I think I sold the first one for like $95 or something like that. And I was like telling everybody I knew, I sold one. It was on eBay, and it it just had these like hand drawn things on it. And it kind of went from there. And that sort of became, the thing I was into. And a lot of it, honestly, as those started selling, I did some Red Llamas, and I still was barely a company. And I got in touch with Scott from Weezer. Somebody referred him to me, or you know what? It was actually Juan from Mars Volta. Juan Alderete. And I had somehow, I don't remember if he emailed me or somebody put me in touch with him. And then he was like, hey, you should talk to my friend Scott, talk to him. And then both those guys, I just sent some pedals to, and I sent Scott a pedal, and he kind of became a friend. And, that wasn't all of it, but that definitely, having him use it and kind of refer me to other people, it lent some legitimacy to what I did.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as soon as you have, well-known artists that trust you and trust recommending your stuff, even that little bit is just like, especially when you're in this world of making effects, and it's like you don't really know, is this guy just kind of doing, just like sort of hobbyist pulled some schematics, or is this guy really trying to make it a company, really trying to do it? And that kind of can kick you up that notch.
Sure.
Where, you start, people, and also, it helps that I'm a Weezer fan. Well, Mars Volt's a fan. So it wasn't just like somebody random. I was like, whoa, of course I was like flattered and all that kind of stuff. Like what happens with that? So that kind of helped springboard everything. And then, from there, I sent Scott, I think I sent Scott one of the very first Tri-Pi 70s I made. And that was like the first time I really tried to do a triangle muff, and somebody I knew had one. And so I like pulled it apart as much as I could without messing it up. And I sent that one to him, and I think he still has it on his board. It's like a prototype that I did, and it had some other artwork on it, and it was like a whole thing. And but I think he still has it. I'm sure it's a little bit sentimental for him too. And then I started making that pedal, and then I got I was on eBay one time, and I was looking at these delay pedals, and there was like this weird funky analog delay, and it was in Japan. And so I just messaged the guy on there. I was like, hey, how does this pedal sound? Do you like it? And I got this short message back. It just said, not my favorite. And so, and I was like, oh, this guy's cool. He's just like honest with me and like straightforward. He wasn't like, oh yeah, it sounds great, man. He's like,
not my favorite.
Yeah. And then he looked, I guess just during the question, he just like looked on my eBay ID and saw I had a few pedals for sale that I was just kind of throwing up on eBay. I don't even think I sold them I didn't even have a website yet. And he was like, hey, I think I can distribute those pedals. It's a distributor called 9 Volt.
Yeah.
And I was literally his very first company. And he
really
has so many now, but yeah. And I developed a relationship with him that he was like, I think I can sell these, and then started picking up other ones, and they sold well in Japan. And then he asked me if I could make the Sovtek style, like one of the old Russian ones. And I had this weird pedal. It's the tall font, but I think it's like transitional because it has some of the values of the bubble font in it. So it's got really like a lot of I always kind of hate when people, I don't hate it when people do that. I understand why they do this, but if you A/B like some of the original tall fonts, versus like that one. Well, the whole thing about mine was that the one that I had, it was super low gain. It was like the volume, just to get line level volume, you had to pretty much dime it. If you've ever played the bubble fonts, a lot of them are like that. And you crank the gain, and compared to most other big muffs, it doesn't have much. And all that stuff is like super easy to tweak. But this pedal, I loved it because it worked really well on bass, and it had less of a mid scoop. And he asked me if I could do one of those, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna, it's real easy to goose this up and make more gain, make more output, and do all that. But I'm going to do it like exactly like this one, warts and all. And maybe no one will buy it, maybe no one will get it, But I'm going to like do that to the T. And I even like desoldered all the parts on mine and did all that, and kind of.
So you really dissected it, like down to the as far as you possibly could level.
Yeah, it was kind of painful doing it because I hated to like pull the pedal apart that much, like taking all the parts out and everything. And it became really fun. It was like, kind of a next level from just, like copying a schematic and sort of piecing it together, you know. It was like, and I had done that somewhat with the tripod too, but I was borrowing it, I believe, and it's a long time ago, but I wouldn't do that to someone else's pedal. You know?
Sure.
I've gotten
well, and
now.
it's probably worth mentioning. I think most of the listeners of this podcast probably know this, but diving into all the different Big Muff variants and everything, one thing to keep in mind, and you can speak to this better than I can, but we kind of romanticize some of these things, right? We're like, oh, it's got the vintage correct, blah, 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 blah. But the thing is over at EHX, they were just kind of using whatever was going to work. Was, and just throwing it together and getting it out the door. That's just what it was. That's why there's so much variation, even in when we refer to like a bubble font or a tall font or a triangle or whatever. Even amongst those variants, there's massive differences between them. And so that's why when people get so excited when they get a good one. And I've got one I want to talk to you about here a little bit later after we get through your story. But it's when we're talking about why he, Matt, had to disassemble this pedal to get it just right. It's because what might be on the schematic might not be what's actually in the pedal. So
even if it is, those, especially over time, those values drift on you. Or I kind of have a feeling maybe he would get some resistors in bulk, and maybe the reason that he got them was because they were made and they stayed a certain value, but maybe it was off enough where they had to, like another company had to reject them. You know, maybe it was a 470K and it actually read like, 440K or something like that, even though the stripes on there and everything indicated the 470K value. So I have a feeling,
right?
I don't know this. I've never talked to Mike personally, but I have a feeling maybe he was like, "Oh, I'll take him." And somebody just wanted to get rid of them, because there's so many that I found where you're like, "Wow, this is like not even close." So it's like pretty much all of our pedals, you're not going to find a schematic of it out there, that matches it. And a lot of times I see people say things that aren't, necessarily true about it. They're like, "Oh, I just did this schematic."
Not on the internet.
Yeah. And and I'm like, man, it's hard to convey how much time I've spent on this, on this stuff. And I never want to come across, especially online, like I never comment this or anything. I'm going to come across like the guy trying to justify what he does, but I do always, emphasize that, like a pedal or don't like a pedal or whatever, there's been hours and hours and hours and hours that have gone into it, probably a lot of the times to my detriment, where there's small little things that I honestly could have just left alone. Like it has like a microcosm less mid-range, and it's not just a matter of tweaking the tone section. There's something there it's missing, and I just like get obsessed on it, come back to it, get obsessed on it, come back to it, and I will eventually get it right. But a lot of times it's one of those things like, did it really matter? I could have just fudged it and just been, but like, to me, it's like, if I stick to that sort of code within myself, then I feel good selling these to people and saying, there's a reason I put all this time into this. There's a reason I'm not just cranking these out like, oh, this is this version, this is this version, this is this version. I figure if I know internally that I went through all that effort, it helps to, justify the price of, a pedal, because it's, I'm asking people to pay more than twice as much as you can get a big Muff for from Electro Harmonics right now, the smaller ones, and it's a different market. And, I want people to know that, hey, it's not, and we're a smaller company, can't buy everything in bulk. I got employees to support, all that stuff. But
yeah,
the main thing is like, hey, that's a lot of what you're paying for. It's like when you pay a producer or a mastering engineer or something like that, you're not just paying them for like what they literally do. It's like you're paying them for all the stuff they did before to prove themselves, So
that's a really good comparison, because if people do want to try to make comparisons like, well, why would I spend all the money on that pedal? All it is XYZ, and they just add up the sum of the parts. That's like saying, why would I pay this mastering engineer? All he does is sit in front of speakers and turn knobs. Like, it's
funny.
It's the same thing.
I just did a post about that the other day, sort of sticking up for mastering engineers. And I think, not a post, I'm sorry. I just responded to one and I got a comment back like, sounds like what a mastering engineer would say. I'm like, I can't master anything worth a shit. But, I was just kind of like, look, in defense of mastering engineers, maybe the mastering engineer did just look, maybe because if the recording was done really well, the mastering engineer doesn't have to do a whole lot. And maybe he pulled it in and didn't have to do a ton to it. He just made it more cohesive. But, you're not just paying for him to turn knobs and spend more time. You're paying for somebody, if you're paying a lot of money, you're paying for somebody who's done, hundreds of records and knows right away this is going to sound like crap when you listen to it on headphones. This is going to sound great on headphones and on the stereo and on this, and you're paying for all that experience in the past. It's not, you're not, paying. And he's done records where he had to spend hours tweaking and, sort of, trying to make something out of trying to make something sound pro that did not sound pro when it was delivered.
Polish a turd, as people say sometimes.
Exactly. So even though your record, if you and your engineer and whoever else did the job, really well, then he doesn't have to do much. But that doesn't mean he doesn't deserve to get paid for it. I've had records I've done before, and actually when I was working with that producer, it's the first time he had somebody that really knew what they were doing, master it. It wasn't a ton of difference, but it was all of a sudden these songs that sounded kind of disjointed and everything all just kind of glued them all together. And then I was like, oh, it sounds like a record. It has that it has that thing that like every recording I ever did where I was like, this sounds amazing. And then you put it, in your car and it's just got that different thing from the other records that you listen to. And you're like, what is that? Why does it not sound like a record? So,
I mean, and on the other side, that's why you pay somebody good, because I've worked with mastering engineers specifically that we got the stuff back and was like, this sounds way worse than what we sent you, and that's it's like, what did you do? All the details gone. It's like they just put it in a compressor and just went, all right, I'm done. It was just like, it sounded bad. So we worked with somebody else and got it to sound the way it should sound. But yeah, I just think that's a good example.
I'm not knocking, if, when I was broke, early 20s and, all that, I would have just, if all this stuff existed, like I was kind of right when Pro Tools and M boxes were coming out, when I was in my early 20s, that stuff didn't really exist. But, I would totally just do it myself.
Of course.
I didn't have any money to pay. And so I'm not knocking somebody that just does it themselves. I didn't have money to pay a mastering engineer and all that. I would have just been like, well, I'll just use this plug-in and it's great.
Of course. We all would.
There. Yeah. But if it, people that go out of their way to be like, mastering engineers a waste of time, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, well, there's a reason that they exist.
It's that old story of I used to hear it in more entrepreneur type circles where the company flies this expert out and they're trying to debate on where they need to put these components and whatever. He flies out, they pay him lots of money, he walks into the boardroom, he looks at the design they have and he puts an X on the board and he's like, all right, thanks guys, I'll send you the bill. And they're like, well, we paid you $10,000. All you did is come out and, draw one X on the board. And he's like, yes, but how many years did it take me to learn where to put the X? People who put in a lot of time into any discipline, if it's something that they're doing for a career, I think, they make it look easy. They're like, oh, it's easy because look how easy it was for this guy or this girl. And it's like, well, that's because they're really good. So
and that goes for something like you're saying. It could be any sort of thing, but I mean that goes for somebody that landscapes or somebody that mows lawns or you see them and they just don't even think of it when they do it, and you see this professional result that they have. And we kind of, in society, we tend to not put a lot of emphasis on those more simple jobs. But like when you see someone versus a new person that does that, you just get that, you get that skill over time that just comes, there's nothing magical about what I do. I don't think I'm like amazingly talented or whatever. It's just that I've spent so much time doing it. And, if I had spent this much time, cooking, I'd like to think would be a really great cook now.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, that's even like, I always compare that to musicians too. Like, I'm a big Roy Buchanan guy. Like that style of music I don't listen to, but I love Roy Buchanan, and people are always like, he's so talented. He's such a talented guy. And I read a book about him and I'm like, yeah, he's got some talent, but the dude from the time he was in like elementary school, he would come home as soon as he was done with his homework and that, he would play his guitar until he fell asleep with it in his hands at like 12 at night. Wake up, repeat, wake up, repeat, wake up, repeat. And then the second he could get out of school, he was touring full time. And it's like, yeah, you had some talent there, but it's all those hours. That's what made him what he is. I always feel like, a lot of times time spent and repetition experience, that'll outdo talent, because you can be
sometimes,
you can be talented and then just not cultivate it. And, I don't know, I could be the best, painter in the world for all I know, but I never really tried it. So,
right.
And I didn't care to, but, if some people do have that thing, we have those musicians in history that are just like kind of ungodly good, where they have a huge amount of talent and they find that thing, and it's like, those are the ones where you're like, that's, they definitely take it to the next level. But then you have those guys that, hey, maybe they weren't that great to begin with, but they just refused to quit.
Yeah.
And they just kept going. And, that's, it's always a neat thing. So I don't know, I consider myself more along those lines of, as opposed to like some of the dudes at Strymon, or some of those guys are just like, they just go and do the math and everything in their heads and all that. And like, they make amazing stuff, And,
the Maris people, like, I'm just like, how did you even think to even like have the idea that you wanted to do that, let alone know how to do it?
And then like put it together and know how to, I'm sure same thing. They weren't just like, oh, easy, do this. They spent tons and tons of time on it and everything, and it's like, there's same with music, there's the Berkeley graduates, and then there's Keith Richards, and everything in between,
Absolutely.
Hi, I'm Vincent, and I'm here to talk about the Maris Mercury X. My dad's always going on and on about how cool Maris is. He really went off on one about the Mercury X the other day. He said something about a 4,800 hertz sample rate and 99 preset locations and 33 banks, and something along the lines of the most advanced reverb pedal ever devised by man? That's all true, but I only care about one thing. This pedal sounds sick. So make sure you check out the Mercury X and all the other fine products at maris.us, as well as fine retailers worldwide. All right, Dad, now can I have my Pocky?
How exactly do artists get their music on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Tidal, all these services? How in the world do you get your music there? Well, in the past, you had to use something called a record label. But these days, you can use DistroKid. DistroKid is the absolute easiest way to get your music up on streaming services. And it's the most affordable way to do so. Not only do plans start at $22.99 for the entire year, that's less than $2 a month, DistroKid also does not take a cut of your streaming revenue, unlike some other services out there. Even better if you sign up by going to tonemob.com/distrokid. That's tonemob.com/distrokid. One more time, that's tonemob.com/distrokid. You'll get 30% off. That's right, 30% off their already extremely reasonable prices. So go to tonemob.com/distrokid and get your music out there. Well, yeah, that was a tangent, but we were talking about you dissecting the pedal.
Yeah.
So
Tangents
once you
are good.
start,
Usually some of my favorite things on podcasts when they get totally lost on something else, and you're like, wow.
Sometimes this whole podcast is a tangent. So,
yeah.
It's all fine. I like it. That was great. But you were dissecting this one.
The Russian one, and I didn't tell, his name is Kaz. I didn't tell him either. Because it's, there's a language barrier, so it's hard to go into a ton of detail.
Yeah.
So, we always keep things pretty meat and potatoes with the conversation. But I was like, I'm going to do this. And I kind of just like briefly explained it. And it was kind of a tough decision to make. It really was, because, the one that I happened to do that on, the main one, that was my first like true dissection. I was like, I really thought it wasn't going to sell well. I just thought people aren't going to get this. But I did, to help with that, I did a lengthy explanation on our website, because I saw so many. That's also one thing that, I feel really, if anyone's like starting off and trying to do pedals or whatever, is, in our descriptions online and everything, I really break down what the process was going into it. I try to, and especially back then, I think they were even longer. I really did an explanation. This is why this pedal is not going to have a ton of gain. This is why it's not going to have a ton of output, but this is the benefit of it. The benefit in that sense was what the tall font is, you get a lot of presence. You get this sort of overdrive. It's easier if you're the kind of person that doesn't just want pure saturation. You want, it's kind of maybe you've tried Muffs and didn't like it a ton, and I give a real breakdown of it because, it's kind of disappointing too sometimes when you go to buy something and it's like 2 sentences and you're like, cool. But, I like being, being informed as to why something's special. At the end of the day, you could say, well, just all that matters is the sound, but still anything I buy, I want to know the person, cared enough to explain to me why.
Especially when it's things we care about or are using to create things we care about. I mean, that's why this podcast exists. This is why the whole boutique pedal industry exists, is because there's enough people that care on another level versus, just give me the thing, at least in my view of it.
Yeah. And I mean, you got to, nowadays it's just a different world, and you have to, when there's things are so in the pedal industry, but in so many industries now, it's just so much competition. And, people want to know why. They want to know why am I buying this? Why? I mean, there's people also that, maybe have a little more money and they'll just be like, oh, I heard this is good, and they'll buy it, and they like having a ton of pedals, and, that's fine too. But, me, especially when I started where I just had enough money to buy nicer stuff and everything like that. I needed something to push me over that line to take a chance on a pedal. You know what I mean? I remember one of my first, because I, despite making the Way Huge pedal and all that, I couldn't afford one because they were just, even back then, since he wasn't around anymore, they were just obscenely expensive. At least it seemed like that to me at the time. But I came across Keeley's site and his compressor, and I just read the descriptions over and over again, and I found on forums him talking about it and listened to all the samples, and I think it was a couple $100 at the time, but that was a good chunk of money for me to spend on a pedal, because I only had 3 pedals that I really loved and used. So it was and I overthink anyway. So I was like, I really want this, because I've never bought a pedal just online before, really. On scene, I was used to, I'm older, so I was used to, you go into the guitar store, you mess around and find something, and and just buying it online. And I got it, and I was like, oh, this thing's the best. I get it. And I kind of felt proud of myself for getting it, because a compressor too, it's a thing a lot of people don't get, a lot of people don't like. And, it can be one of those things you turn it on and you're like, okay, it's working. Like, what's the point?
Right.
It's not, it doesn't make a big echo, or it doesn't distort,
make your amp explode. Yeah.
And it's like, but it also taught me that thing of like, there's a difference between the bedroom and the rehearsal room. Where like things like a compressor, I think, unless you're doing like straight up like chicken picking and stuff, where you're just like, you can hear right away that snappiness and poppiness. But for, a rock musician, I feel like anyone that's using a compressor in that setting is like, you're using it more subtle and more sort of to enhance your sound, as opposed to just squash it.
Yeah.
And I remember using it at rehearsal, and I was like, oh, I get it. My solo is like, I take a solo and then it has like this bite to it for when the, depending on how the attack was sent and everything. So that also, not getting off on a tangent, that also fed into what I do, because I was like, oh, those little things, people that, really appreciate that and do a lot of live playing. Like I hope they would buy stuff from me and be like, oh, I get it. I never liked big muffs, but I get this, I get this, this tone, and especially when, you can't, it's not like I'm just like, ripping off electro harmonics. I'm making stuff that you can't buy.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? So I'm like, I hope you get this, and it also taught me, a lot about what you said. Like there's so many different circuits within the same enclosures with those pedals. Like I have a Ram's head. It sounds terrible. An original Ram's head, terrible pedal. And, and then it works fine. It works great. But the particular schematic is just an awful one. And
just a mess.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember like getting the first, I have a couple now, but I remember getting that first one and I was all excited and I plugged it in and I was like, oh, what is all the hype about? You know what I mean? And then I got another one and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I get what all the hype's about. But, and really said, I think at the time I thought, oh, there must be a couple of these circuits. But I think like Kit Ray online, I think he has some ungodly amount of big muffs. I think he came up with, I think it's like 17 or 18 different circuits within this Ram's head enclosure that look exactly the same.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Don't quote me on that number, but it's something crazy like that, where it's like, man, and I'm sure at the time they just didn't think there's going to be, nerds like us that are going to be pulling these pedals apart in 40 years and like analyzing them and posting pictures up online and writing out, they were just like, oh, the guitarist is going to plug it in. There'll be a bunch of distortion. And he'll be like, cool.
Yeah. I'm sure that's exactly what they thought, dude. Like, does it distort? All right, cool. Our job is done here. I've got one here that it's like near and dear to my heart. I've played a lot of big muffs. I have a lot of different ones. And, but this one I had such a moment with, because I saw it sitting at the store. This is like 2000, I don't know, 14 maybe, somewhere in that ballpark, 2013. And it's a weird one. It's one of those, there's all these transition eras, right? So this is in between it's the big box black one with the small text. So they hadn't quite went to the smaller black box yet. Mm-hmm. They were still in the same green box size, but it was still painted black with the more updated text that we're used to seeing. And I was like, that one looks pretty cool. It's beat up in all the right ways. I was like, but I don't really need another big muff. Like, what? I'm not going to buy this thing. Let's go plug it in and try it. And I plugged it in and immediately was like, well, I know this is coming home. This thing sounds insane. And I'm not obviously the first person to think that. However, ended up in that store, somebody carved on the bottom of it, "Don't touch Mr. Frost's muff." So Mr. Frost, apparently, whoever that is like loves this pedal.
Maybe it's from you posting it. I've seen that before.
I've posted it a couple times. I've had no answers as to who Mr. Frost could be. I kind of wish that I had more information on it, but it is an insane sounding Russian muff. It's like it's not as gainy, but it has more gain than you'd think out of a Russian. It's a special one. If you ever come by, you have to play this one because I'd love to hear what you think about it because I was fully convinced I was going to try it, put it back on the shelf and walk out. I plugged it in, one chord, was like, no, I'm buying this pedal. This is coming home today.
Well, part of that, honestly, is, I mean, this will be giving away a little secret. So if you're, someone's out there and wanting to, make big muffs and do all that, this is a good tip. But part of that is they eat these really crappy ceramic caps that they used in those. And a lot of the sort of, world of boutique pedals, everybody got really fixated on, metal film became a buzzword. Like you have to have metal film caps, you have to have, metal film resistors and all that stuff, which in a lot of times it does help a lot. But for distortion circuits, I always like to try a few different types because a lot of the fuzz circuits, one of those, they don't really like metal film caps. We use them on most of our stuff because the majority of the time it does help keep noise down. It kind of, it's more...
A little more consistent, right?
Exactly. A lot more consistent, actually. And, but there are times when you try them and you're like, oh, this just sounds way better. And it's always another dicey one because, especially when everyone opens up, they want to be like, oh, look at this crappy one. Like we did our good one pedal, right? And that one was this one that came across my bench. Somebody, this guy actually named George Smith. That's why it's got the little, I don't know if you've seen it in detail, but it has a little thing that says G Smith on it.
Okay, got it.
It just came across my bench and I was like, I've never heard one like this and I've never seen one like this. And even as many schematics are out there and everything, I traced it out and made a new schematic with it and I couldn't find it anywhere. It was like a totally unique one that I was surprised. I went on Kit Ray's site where almost every time I'm like, he's got,
he's found it. Yeah.
Yeah. And which a lot of times can be a good starting point, but I didn't see it on there and I was like kind of stoked. I'm like, oh man, cool. And, but the other thing about it was, the thing was falling apart, but it had almost all ceramic caps, and I first built it, trying to make a work-alike of it. I actually messaged him. I was like, hey, this restore may take a little bit longer, because I was like, I want to spend some time with this if it's all right. It's like, yeah, sure. Don't worry about it. And, so I built another one. And it sounded good down in the ballpark, but like it just didn't quite sound right. And the one I built was a lot quieter, a lot more practical, But then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to dig around in the shop because over all these years, I have pretty much every cap and resistor you can imagine. And I just found like the worst ceramic. I had some old surplus ceramics. And there was a couple of values that I was like, oh man, I can't find. They were kind of weird older values. So I went on eBay and just grabbed some of the crappiest ones I could and put it all together. And it was like, literally, it's like, boom, oh, there's the sound. You know what I mean? And it was what it needed. And I, even for some of the main parts, I hunted down, God, I hope I don't, giving this away, I hope I don't drive the prices up on crappy ceramic caps. but I went and because I feel like, especially with ceramics, when a lot of time passes, like they dry out and it affects the sound. Yeah. And so I still do it. If I come across like a big surplus, like new old stock group of caps or something, I'll just grab them on eBay, if I can get a ton of them, where I know I can use if I'm going to use them in a pedal, I can't just have different caps every time, so it's like, if I can get a big surplus of them. And so I did that. I found, and it takes some digging around, but I would find these bulk lots, stuff like that. And I just grabbed a bunch of them for the George Smith pedal And, you can look inside. It even says like dirty guts on the pedal. You look inside and there's like nasty looking old caps, and, but the pedal, I'm really proud of that one. It really sounds great. And, has this kind of like syrupiness and noise and, about it, but it captured that pedal. And, there's little things like that you have, especially as you get more mature doing this stuff and everything, you realize you have to get rid of some of those preconceived notions of, just always using this or always using that. And I like to always try and keep myself from falling into that well of just like, we just do this because this is what you do.
Yeah.
And still be open to, finding, thinking outside or rethinking inside, whatever it is.
I mean, I totally understand that. It's something that, Scott, I talk about him constantly, but at Stringjoy, we're always trying new things. It's like, okay, well, we found this one little tweak to how we run, whatever, 48s, insert gauge here, that we've always done it this other way. But what if this works better? For one reason, whether it runs faster or it makes a better string or whatever, by whatever criteria better is, we'll try it. We'll try it on a like a gross of strings or so and just see what it does. And so oftentimes we've found things that we've then continued to implement moving forward. And we don't make like a big announcement like, hey, everybody, we've got these new quote unquote strings, because it's just a better way to make a, say, 48 or whatever gauge. It doesn't matter. But like constantly trying to improve and not fall into the trap of like, we do it this way because we do it this way is a good thing, I think, for anybody, because sometimes you find out the way it's been done is the way it's been done just because it's the way it's been done and for no real reason other than that. And there are better ways to go about things, or different ways that are just interesting. So like, don't be afraid to explore things.
If you get stuck in that too, it can like wreck you, because we've all seen, especially in the music world, especially in the gear world, you see companies that they're just stuck, and they have a lot of the people running it that have been in the business forever, and they get, the second any sort of change is suggested or whatever, they get so like antsy about it. And it's kind of like, well, why, change is what the world's about. Like, why be so stuck with those things and be so threatened by the challenge of changing them? You know what I mean? And you'll see, again, I keep saying, especially nowadays, but our world's changing so fast and everything like that. You just have to be able to shift and adapt and do all that, and you got to be flexible with everything and willing to not be stuck in your ways. Otherwise, you die. You have to be like a shark. Stop swimming, you die.
That's right. And that's not to say you shouldn't have convictions about certain things, but if there are opportunities to improve, then it should at least be explored. Right. It's one thing, if somebody's like, well, why don't you make all your strings at 72 inches? That'll fit everything on the planet. It's like, well, that's a massive waste for 99.9999% of instruments. So we're not going to do that. Right. But there are other things that we can try and other things we can explore to possibly improve things. And I think it's just a good thing artistically as well. Like if you're always just playing the same riff over and over again, I don't know, go listen to some shoegaze or something else that maybe is out of your wheelhouse and you've never played before. Go listen to some country, go listen to some hip hop, whatever it is, and mess around with that for a little while. And let some of those influences bleed into your playing and into your songwriting, because I don't know, just anything stagnant is, you can kind of sense it as a listener too. After a while, it's like, wow, okay, this again. And I'm definitely guilty of that. I'm trying to get outside of my comfort zone a little bit. I've been playing a lot of acoustic guitar in the last month or so, which is not something I ever thought would come out of my mouth. So it's it's good to explore things. I'm glad this came up.
Yeah, whenever I kind of have the same thing. I'm obviously an electric player, but I'll pick up a acoustic and then I'm like, oh, I should do this more often. It's really, nothing to plug in, nothing to, run through, nothing that, like you just like, you like it. I forget that joy of just being like, I have an idea, grab it, start playing, although,
Yep.
I'll do that on unplugged electric as well, but, that simplicity of not getting caught up in everything working right and doing all that. It's like, it works. You just hit the strings.
Push the strings, strum, which is hilarious for me to say because like that's what my parents pushed me towards initially. They didn't push me. They were like, oh, you want to try guitar? You should play acoustic guitar first. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, okay, any guitar will do at this point. But I wanted to play metal and punk rock and stuff. I'm like, this is not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to play Waylon Jennings. I love Waylon Jennings, but that wasn't what my vibe was at the time. I wanted to play Metallica, and that was a little bit challenging to do on a Takamine at the time. But I find myself going back to it and just really feeling that same kind of joy I felt that I even had an instrument at all. Like it's I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a little bit long in the tooth, but I was feeling kind of nostalgic just playing all these acoustic songs that I grew up listening to and learning and all that, even though my youthful side is still trying to rebel against it, but I guess it's inevitable at some point.
It's funny, my uncle was the one that taught me. He was the only guitarist in the family and kind of got me going all this, and he became a luthier and the whole deal. But he was one that made me do the acoustic first, which I hated, but I was really grateful for it, that he did that to me, because the particular acoustic I had, the action was really high and hurt to play the thing, after a while, especially when you're developing those muscles in your hands and they're
totally
not that strong, and the calluses on your fingers and everything. And he had me playing these like, in the 80s, like beginner guitar books,
oh yeah,
I mean, at the end, which was like, I'd be like, these like old country songs like that I had never heard in my life that were like standards, but I'd just be like, why? But it put this core foundation in, and then of course I get an electric, and I'm like, oh my god, this thing's so easy to play.
Right? Yeah,
this is like
for children.
This is like a piece of cake. I'm just like flying through this stuff, And so I was really glad that he made me do that, because I think also what just knowing those core chords and those like cowboy chords and all that kind of stuff. Like I see people that don't even know that anymore. And I'm like, sure, when I'm playing electric and all that, I'm not using a ton of open E and open G. I usually like to like strip the chords down a bit to sound better on electric and all that. But like, I would feel pretty silly if I didn't know them. Someone's like, this is D, it goes to D7, goes to C sharp minor 7. Like if I was just like, what? Like, I don't know what you mean. I would, that would bug me, and so I'm not a jazz player. I'm not a virtuoso. I'm a halfway decent, hacky guitarist or whatever. But, I do appreciate that I could at least sit down and like, jam with somebody or whatever. And I really, know how to not be totally lost.
Well, you're one step ahead of me. I'm always totally lost. Even if I'm not, I am somehow still lost at the same time. I don't know. We are brought to you today by Sweetwater, specifically the Gear Exchange. You may have heard about this. This is a place where you can go to buy and sell your used gear. Maybe you got a pedal over there that's just kind of collecting dust. Maybe there's something you've been eyeing from the Sweetwater catalog. Well, right now is a great time to turn that unused gear into something you're actually going to use. Even better, if you sell on the Gear Exchange, you can keep 100% of the sale as long as you choose a Sweetwater gift card as your payout method. That is not too shabby, because let's be honest, most of this buying and selling we do is just to fund new gear purchases, and that is a great way to reach a wide variety of customers and keep 100% in your pocket, or rather on your pedal board. So go check out the Sweetwater Gear Exchange and turn that unused gear into something that's actually going to help you write that next huge riff.
Hello there. I'd like to introduce you to your new best friend, the Chase Bliss Audio Lossy. Lossy is a collaboration between Chase Bliss and Goodhertz. And it's meant to give you some control over those weird digital artifacts that come with very compressed audio. You're hearing it right now. All the changes that are taking place are strictly coming from my playing dynamics. I'm just interacting with the pedal and letting it do its thing. In some true stereo goodness. If you'd like some more details about Lossy, I'd invite you to head over to chaseblinssaudio.com. I think you're going to like what you find.
Yeah, it's been a long...
usually fake it enough to convince someone that I know what I'm doing, but
I do. I have faked it a time or two. In fact, the first time I'd played, I've told this story a few times. The first time I had played with a group of people in like 5 years at the time was when I went on the JHS show and they did some jams. They're like, "You want to jam?" I'm like, "I have not jammed with anyone in years. This is going to be weird." And I think I faked it well enough that I guess if I hadn't said anything, maybe people wouldn't have known. So I was even playing leads. I don't play leads. I'm just like a chugga chugga dun 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 type of guy. So it was that was a little bit nerve wracking though, to like have that be my first comeback into a band situation, even though it was just for a couple hours in front of like thousands of people. It was kind of weird.
Yeah, I remember with leads and stuff and learning, I learned a lot of the scales and learned that kind of stuff, but then I just wasn't really using them, like to the point where I would sort of forget them. And I had this sort of epiphany in my like later 20s. I was like, what a guitar, like, what do I want to sound like? Like, I would learn like some of the modes and stuff like that. And I was like, and I would play through them. I'd be like, well, I'm not going to use that. I don't, that's right. That's not what I want to sound like or whatever. And I got really into more like dissonant kind of stuff and everything. And so I was just like, and I had this, I couldn't even say like this guy or like that guy, but I had this idea in my head of like what I wanted to sound like. And I was like, I'm just going to work towards that. And instead of this sort of vague, be a better guitarist, just big foggy thing, I was like, there's this sort of guitar player I can sort of hear in my head. I don't have the skills to do it yet. But I kind of have an idea of how to get there. And that was actually, what's funny is I was actually part of the Roy Buchanan thing, because not the style I play at all. Not, anything, but just I forget who turned me on to him, but I would watch and he'd do this 3-finger thing. He was, he didn't use the pinky a whole lot, but he would just do a lot of the pick and then bing, bing with his, middle and ring, and get these runs going. And they were kind of messed up sounding. Like they weren't real precise. It was almost like he was just fighting the guitar at certain points, and like it was fighting back. So it was just like this like tension. And there'd be like flubbed picks, all over the place. And all he would do is just have like a little bit of reverb on it, and it's just attacking this thing and just doing, going up and down the neck. And I was like, I want to do that, but in a different way. But I just like learned so many techniques from him, and just these like, weird little like faux whammy bar stuff, where he was the first one that I figured out. I'd heard it before, but never did, where even if you don't have a whammy bar, you like, bend a couple notes up really high and then hit them when they're bent. So the down bend almost creates this whammy effect. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. I mean, I'm sure, metal guys and stuff like that have known that forever, but to me, I was like, oh, it's the first time I'd seen it. I was like, that's so cool. You get this sort of effect, and just like doing stuff with your hands and manipulating it, and getting these like almost chorusy sounds by banging through your pickup selector and stuff, and all kinds of stuff like that. So yeah, that journey as a guitarist is always a good one. And I'm still not, I don't play quite like that guy that I want to, but I keep chipping away at it. And I just recently started playing music again, which is nice. Have sort of a band thing, but and I'm getting back to that feeling of playing with people, and also accepting the fact, I'm almost 48 years, or I'm almost 49 years old, and accepting the fact. Sorry, I got off mic. Accepting the fact that it's not going to be the same as it was in my 20s.
Sure.
Because I remember I played a few times over the years, and I was like, it just didn't have that oomph to it.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't have that grab of just, that excitement of being in the rehearsal room. And I was really, it kind of made me depressed for a while, because I was like, is that just not in my brain anymore? Can I just not get that from, that same 21-year-old, I'm practicing every day and working some crappy job, but all I want to do is music. Like, am I just not gonna be able to get that sort of high from rehearsal anymore? That you go in, bang out a song, like a new one, and those occasions where it comes out even better than what you thought it would, and just that elation that goes with all that and everything. And played more later on after that stuff died down, and I was just like, man, is that just not something my brain can do anymore, where I get that excited? And I really got down about that for a while. And then more recently, when I started playing again, I'm getting it again. It's just different. You know what I mean? Like, I sat down.
Totally.
We weren't all sort of learning together. Like, this time I sat down with like old friends of mine, and we've all just over the years, we've just gotten better. Especially this friend of mine, this kid Ben. I call him a kid just because he's a little bit younger than me, but we're all old. And we've just just through playing and just maturity and all that, and better. So we could like sat down to do music, and like it was just like, oh, everything was really easy, because we don't have that the struggle where we're all sort of learning, and it feels different, because in that struggling to learn stuff too, there's excitement in that. When like I've been in bands where the bass player is literally learning how to play bass by being in the band, which I feel like
that's all bass players, right? That's how it works.
Well, I had one band. This guy became really, really good too. I was just like, he was my roommate, and I needed a bass player, and I'm like, you kind of like guitar, right? I'm like,
well, it's just long guitar.
Yeah. And he was like, oh, cool. And he's one of those guys that took to it really quick. Man, it was just easier than going through the effort of trying to find,
well, half the time it's about who you're vibing with, almost more than how well they play. It's like, as long as they play to an acceptable level, but you really like them, that's very important when playing in a band.
Yeah. And you see that when someone, you don't see it as much now, but when someone goes through that process where you just kind of throw them into the mix and sink or swim like that, if there's somebody that just has that little music thing, where they can kind of grab onto it pretty quick, you see the progress they make, where they're doing that are like, I didn't even know I could do this.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's just that thing of like, you can watch all the videos you want on YouTube, and you can practice in your bedroom all you want. But those leaps and bounds you make when it's just like, here's play, dude. These are the notes. Figure it out. Play it terribly for a while, and you're going to get better at it. And you just see, and I've had people in my life, the musicians that I've interacted with, where it's like a little bit scary. Or like, man, part of the reason I think that you're getting it so quick is because you're not thinking about it. You don't have all that stuff to cloud your vision, going into it. You're just like, play this note. Cool. Oh, this note, I don't necessarily know what's called a fifth, but this sounds cool, and I throw that in once in a while.
Yep.
And like, seventh, what's that? That makes it sound weird, and you see someone, it's just like, man, that really is just what, kind of calls back to what we were talking about earlier in the podcast, where it's like, just doing,
Definitely.
Yeah. And that's what one of the things as far as music goes, there's a lot of, it's easy to get upset about free music being available. And, especially, my generation that saw the 90s and CDs and all that kind of stuff. And then, everyone was kind of like, well, you can just get all this stuff for free. What's that? Mm-hmm. There is something to me to be said for not making as much money now from those things, from just selling music that's recorded. It's kind of almost pushed this first full circle thing where now that someone down the street, you can be like, oh, they can show you this recording, and you're like, it sounds like it's pretty close. Like it's it's some dude that was on GarageBand. You're like, it sounds like pretty close to a real record. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But now that it's not that hard to do that, and everybody can do that, it's kind of like when you play live, you got to prove you can pull that off. And it's sort of come full circle, like almost back to like the 50s and 60s where it was all about live. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because this doesn't apply to all areas of music, but you see some of these indie bands and stuff that like, they're like, well, if we want to make money, we got to tour. Like we can't sit back and wait for Spotify royalties. That's not going to pay anything. We have to like hit the road and tour relentlessly. And you see some of these bands that like, they just get like incredible. Like they become like such good players because, and a lot of them, they're just, they may not be rich, but they're like making enough that they don't have to have a job. And, and they have to do that by, you can't have this amazing sound. If you're going to be a, live playing band, you can't have this amazing sounding record and then not be able to back it up. Because we've all seen when someone does that and they try to back it up and it does, and they can't.
Yes.
We've all been to a concert where we're like, oh, there's that song I love. I can't wait for it. And they play it and you're like, bro, this sucks. Like you didn't even come close to the record, or it was just not good. And there was obviously a lot of done in the studio to make that sound good, and I feel like you can't get away with that as much nowadays. You got to be able to, or you got to be able to put on a better show than the record sound. So there's benefits to that,
for sure. Well, hey, we have this was a great conversation, by the way. I really, really enjoyed this talk. Thank you for taking the time to come on. We have just crested the hour mark, and I've got a couple classic questions that I like to wrap the podcast up on before we slide over to Patreon. But before I do that, I like to give the guests a chance to take the floor and shout out anybody they want to shout out. If you want to, say hi to your mom, or if you want to plug something, or if you want to just have a thing you think people need to hear. You're talking to a few thousand people right now, so get off of your chest whatever you got to get off.
There's always people that help in this industry. I don't know if they necessarily want to shout out, but there's been, I can do kind of a general one. There's just everybody. We are in this weird industry, this weird pedal world, where there's a lot more sharing and helping going on than a lot of other businesses, where it's not so secretive, and it's not, and like, I have so many guys that, I get stuck on something and I shoot them a text and they're like, here, do this. And I'm like, wow, man, you just saved me hours and hours of, research, and, and like, even, Keely is like that. I mean, he's an open book as far as helping you. As I, was able to become friends with him over the years. And, he doesn't, he just shot me off like a schematic that's not online. I'd be like, well, here's how I did it, and I'm like, damn,
sounds like Rob.
Cool. And Matt from Alexander is always one that I give credit to. He's helped me out with so much stuff. And,
he's way overdue to come on this thing too. Got to get him on here too.
And then, one of my just, along with being pedal buddies, just like legitimate, like closest friends is, Tom from Tomcat Pedals is like,
love that dude.
Yeah, and it's weird because I have a lot of relationships with people that are like, it's online or it's like via text. So you're good friends, but like you're not calling them up, like my girlfriend broke up with me. You're not. It's not that level, It's sort of surface, but like he's probably the most that like we're just genuine good friends, and everything. And that's one of those gifts that I've gotten from this. And that started from, I think at the time he emailed me with some pedal question, and I was like, yeah, I gave him some info about it, and we'd swap things back and forth, and it all sprouted from that, And so there's just like, and I'm sure I'm forgetting lots of people. There's just so many people that help each other out in this whole world, and it's weird. It's still weird. Like even though all these years I've been doing it, then people are like, yeah, you're direct competition with me.
Right.
And I'm, and you're helping me with a pedal that is, in the same ballpark as an exact one that you make, and potentially people that might buy my pedal instead of yours. And you're still more than willing to like share that info with me. And we both know that, and it's a strange thing. I don't know. I'm not steeped in a lot of other industries, but I'm pretty sure it's not always like that. In the world.
It's not even necessarily like that in all aspects of guitar, actually. It's definitely not like that in strings. I can tell you that much right now. Not at all.
Because it doesn't make sense to be. I mean, it doesn't make sense to help out someone that's your direct competition. But somehow in this world, it's like becomes this sort of big, like, it's going to come around to you. Someday that person may need you to help with them with something or whatever, and like if you just look at the short term, like, that person might make me sell less, then if you're short-sighted with it, then like be like, oh, I shouldn't do that. But when it's just this big sort of potpourri of it'll come back, and not even in so much a karma sense, but just like, yeah, it's everybody did that with me, so I'd be a pretty big dick to not do that with someone else.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And
yeah.
So, that's all as far as like shout outs and such, I don't know if I
Sounds good.
My employees definitely
that
make all this happen. Because without them, I'm not gonna, we sell enough volume nowadays. I'm not gonna survive trying to do this stuff in my garage anymore. So they're the bread and butter. And that's not to get sidetracked, but we were talking about the value of a pedal and everything, and what you pay for and the components and everything. And it's like, when you're buying a pedal from us and from any other pedal company, you're paying their rent. Those guys that work for me, you're paying their, expenses. You're paying for their car, and you're paying for them to have a job to come to every day. And, a lot of times that's the biggest expense in making something is labor, and
absolutely
you know that. And so it is one of those weird things when someone's like, it's this much for the parts. Well, I'm not going to lie to you. The parts don't cost this enormous amount of money. It's the running of the business. And that's true of any business. You're not paying it, but it is a beautiful thing too, when you're buying something from a smaller company, and not to be that like, buy small, buy local, we've all heard that so many times, but when you're buying something, it's like literally I have a couple at-home guys, but we have, I think, 6 now working for us, and then one guy that's kind of does little stuff on the side. But like, you're paying their bills along with mine, of course. But like, it's a very direct thing. And it's kind of neat sometimes. It's scary sometimes, bro. It's scary.
I know. Yeah,
because I'm like, I remember I had that moment. I realized that I was like, holy. If I don't, like, we'd have like a slow spot in sales, and I'm like, if I don't sell pedals right now, like, it's not just me, like, these dudes' lives are going to be really affected.
Yes.
It's not just like, oh, that was fun, but it didn't sell. Oh, bummer. It's like, wow, this is like really, and that's obvious when you say it out loud or look at it on paper, but when like it dawns on you and you're the one running the company all of a sudden, it's like, I don't want to feel like this. It's a little scary.
It's one of those things where it's like, okay, okay, that didn't sell very well. All right, I'll pick up an extra shift or so, and it'll be fine.
Right.
No, that's not how it works when you get even just one person working for you, especially full time. It isn't, oh, bummer, that didn't really work and it really only affected me. It's like, oh, this gamble I made that I thought was going to pay off, super didn't pay off, and now I have to figure it out for all these other people. It's not, I don't want to sound like either of us are complaining about it, because I don't think there's anything else we'd rather be doing. But that is a reality that does sometimes take a little while to set in. And
and it's just when it was just, I thought it was kind of trippy with me personally, because it literally wasn't a gradual thing. I just literally was like, one day I'm like, oh wait, it's like wow, these like my main guy, like, he got a new car and was making the payments, and I was like, if we don't sell pedals, he doesn't make that payment.
That's getting repoed.
And it's easy to digest for myself. That just goes with the territory, food bills, all that kind of stuff. That was someone else. It's and it's neat. It is nice being the boss.
Yeah.
It is nice going into work and there's that vibe in the air of like, oh, people are coming to me for the answers and for make things, and it feels good too. I don't want to discount that. But part of
it's all of these things, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, are you ready for the classic questions? We can slide over to Patreon after that.
Yep.
All right, here we go. I'll be very curious to hear what you say to this one. What is your favorite Boss pedal?
Oh, I love Boss pedals, man. They're DD2.
But what's your favorite?
DD2. The Boss DD2. I think it's the best delay that's ever been made. And
the DD2 is great.
Yeah, and it's kind of a sleeper pedal because everybody knows DD3 and all that came after it, but DD2 was one of the first. I don't know. I'm sure Josh would know the answer to this a lot more than me, but I think it was the first digital delay, and I
believe that's correct. Yeah, and I had Matt Knight, who does the Guitar Nerds podcast, but also works for Boss on years ago, and I'm sure you heard the story about the big long delay chip that's in there, the big digital chip that's in the DD2 and the early DD3. The tale of them locking the engineers in until they figured out how to make that thing fit in there is actually true. They did. They just locked the engineers in the office and wouldn't let them leave until they figured out how to make that pedal work. Which is it can be intense over there, even with their pedals. So I love the DD2. I recently got one. I got a DD2 and a early DD3, and I'm convinced that the early DD3s are probably the same pedal, but just called something else for some reason. They look exactly the same inside, but I don't know that for a fact because I don't make pedals for a living. So I'm like, sound the same, look the same. I know the later versions are different, but I don't know. I do love the DD2.
Somebody tried to explain it to me once, and I'm just, it's a different digital, it's a different world than mine, but I guess... and I'm sure somebody out there will be cringing when I explain this, probably going, "That's not right." But I guess some of the architecture of it is it's sort of a hybrid, actually. Like there's a lot more analog going on in there than later generations of the delays.
Interesting.
And so that's why it's got some of those elements of a analog delay, but it's digital. The repeats aren't quite as pristine, they're not quite as nice, but I'm not a huge analog delay guy. And, I feel like it just doesn't do what I want it to do. And I remember I got the DD2 and I was like, oh, this, I just kind of randomly bought it. I was like, oh, this sounds great. And I A/B'd it with some other delays. I'm like, whoa, this sounds really cool. Why isn't everyone buying these things? It's so nuts. And I've recommended them to a bunch of people. And it's weird, man. Not one of them has bought one.
Nobody? Really?
No. I'm like, bro, I don't. And they're still affordable, And
they're not bad.
And every one of them, I think it's just not this early digital delay. It doesn't have, it doesn't have the word analog in it as far as being an analog delay, and it's just not sexy enough or something. But I'm like, man, I know I've told 5 or 6 people that have asked me what to lay. I'm like, this is the one to get. End of story.
There you go. Maybe they'll get it now.
Yeah, we'll see, man. It's great.
All right, final question.
Bypass on them kind of sucks, though. It's good if you put them in a true bypass.
True, but Final question. What is your favorite kind of pizza?
Oh, man, I'm simple. Just pepperoni. Done. That's
just
it.
Pepperoni? You like a thick crust? You like a thin crust? You got a particular regional style you like, or a pizzeria that you prefer?
There's a place locally here that does the whole, and of course I can't even remember their name, but they do the whole thing where it's kind of a medium crust, but they do the like fire oven.
Oh yeah,
where it has, and it's kind of like there's parts of the crust that are a little burned.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And so you get that weird like crunch and that like sort of coal, or not coal, but like that the taste that only something char, burned. Yeah, char is the word I'm trying to look for in there. And so I don't know if that's considered like Chicago style or something. What it is when
most of those places are, if they're doing a wood oven thing, that's trying to throw back to Italy. Like that's a Naples thing. So not all of them are like that, but usually that's the goal when they're doing that style of pizza. But like New Haven is also will have a little char on it, though those are not wood fired typically. They're different ovens. But yeah, I can go on and on about pizza. I just love pizza so much. It's my other passion.
I'm pretty easily satisfied, but hang on one second.
Yeah.
Sorry, somebody making
no
noise.
worries.
I'm pretty easily satisfied with that. So
right on,
pizza. Man. So pepperoni. That's all I need.
I love a pepperoni pizza. It's always a crowd pleaser. Well, dude, thank you so much for taking the time. We'll see what kind of chaos we can create over on the Patreon section.
Cool.
All right, everybody.
Thanks for listening to me.
Anytime, man. For Matt, this is Blake, and as always, folks, good luck and good tones. Alrighty, folks, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Matt and I got pretty weird over on Patreon. We actually dove into something that I had no idea we were going to be talking about. We talked about martial arts and how he is recovering from a rather serious injury. Not related to the martial arts, but it's still a pretty crazy story. So if you go over there and check it out, I think you're really going to enjoy it. And also, if you sign up for the Patreon, don't forget that you will automatically be entered to win one of the 2 Maris LVX pedals that we are giving away starting today as this published date. So check it out. Go to tonemob.com/LVX for all the details, or you can simply sign up for Patreon and you will automatically be entered and automatically get all kinds of brilliant bonus content. Okay, it's still me, so brilliant is a bit of a stretch, but I think you will enjoy it nonetheless. All right, everybody, good luck out there, stay safe, and I will talk to you on the internet very, very soon. One last thing before we totally sign off here, I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy.
He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.
Well, hey friends, my name is Zach Lupetin. You may know me from the band Dust Bowl Revival, but I also host a music discovery podcast called The Show on the Road. For the last 5 seasons, I've been able to dive deep and have intimate chats with folks like the Lumineers, Ani DeFranco, Wolfpack, Keb Mo, Lake Street Dive, Bela Fleck, and more. So guess what? After 150 conversations with some of my favorite songwriters from around the world, we are bringing brand new episodes to the Osiris Network. New interviews and intimate acoustic performances will be coming at you this summer. And which episodes are coming next, you ask?
I am Zach Goody, the lead singer for the band Smash Mouth.
Our band is called Milky Chance. We are based in Berlin.
My name is David Shaw. I sing and write songs with my band, The Revivalists.
Trust me, these conversations go some wild places. So subscribe to The Show on the Road on Osiris, and we'll see you soon.
This is Krista Makes, guitarist and vocalist for Less Than Jake, and host of Krista Makes a Podcast, a songwriting podcast where every week I'm joined by an amazing guest to break down the writing, recording, and release of one iconic song from their career. In our giant evergreen back catalog of episodes, we've had rock legends such as Dee Snider and Huey Lewis, punk rock favorites like Mark Hoppus, Fat Mike, and Brett Gurewitz, and up-and-coming artists of today such as Liz Stokes of the Beths and Genesis Owusu. We've had guests from all genres and styles of music, and I guarantee that if you peruse our back catalog, you'll see several episodes that'll make you say, man, I gotta hear that. Whether you're a fan of music or a creator of music yourself, you'll take away a whole new appreciation for the songs you know and love. Krista Makes a Podcast is available for free on all the places you could possibly listen to podcasts, and new episodes come out every Monday.